August 31st, 1854. Broad Street, Soho, the heart of London. The public water pump on this street was considered one of the most reliable in the area. Women filled buckets. Children drank directly from the source. Merchants washed their goods. It was just another ordinary day in the most powerful metropolis in the world. 72 hours later, that same street was unrecognizable. Absolute silence. Abandoned carts. Sealed windows. 616 people ceased to exist in less than 10 days, all within a radius of 250 meters. What happened there would change medicine forever. Soho, mid-19th century. A neighborhood where 30 people shared 3-room houses, where waste ran in the open air between the cobblestones of the sidewalks, where the smell of sewage mingled with the smoke from textile factories. Poverty was not just visible, it was breathable. Every corner had its community water pump. Every pump had its well, and these wells, dug decades earlier, shared the subsoil with improvised septic tanks. The Victorian sanitation system was, in practice, an invisible biological lottery. August 28th. A small child presents severe intestinal discomfort. The mother, following the customs of the time, washes the cloths and discards the wastewater into the nearest domestic drain. A banal gesture. Repeated thousands of times a day throughout the city. Hospital records note the case as routine. The child recovers in a few days. The episode is forgotten. But something changed underground. The drain of that residence had a characteristic that no one knew, an old crack in the masonry. The discarded water followed a path unplanned by Victorian engineers. It seeped in, it migrated laterally, and it found the groundwater that fed the Broad Street well. 3 meters of distance separated that house's cesspool from the most popular water source on the block. 3 meters of porous earth. No impermeable barrier, no safety protocol. The engineering of the time did not consider this risk, because the science of the time did not understand what was about to happen. 3 days later, the first adult falls, then another, and another. The progression is exponential. In 48 hours, dozens of households report the same pattern. Severe diarrhea, fulminant dehydration, collapse. Entire families confined. The Victorian medical system panics, but no one looks at the water pump because everyone believes they know where the danger comes from. And they are looking in the wrong place. Victorian London was absolutely certain about what caused epidemics. It wasn't germs, it wasn't contaminated water, it was the air. Miasma theory dominated every medical decision, every public policy, every health manual of the era. Miasma, invisible vapors emanating from decomposing organic matter. A bad smell meant deadly danger. If you could smell the sewage, you were being poisoned by the very air you breathed. The logic seemed perfect. After all, poor neighborhoods smelled bad, and poor neighborhoods got sicker. Cause and effect. Simple. Wrong. The Soho authorities acted immediately. Tar barrels were burned on street corners to purify the atmosphere. Churches called for collective prayer vigils. Doctors prescribed generous doses of opium to calm the intestines and brandy to strengthen the stomach against noxious vapors. Families burned aromatic herbs inside their homes. Merchants sold scented salts promising protection. None of it worked, because the enemy was not in the air. It was being drunk. The social contrast was brutal. Those who had resources fled. Private carriages left Soho loaded with trunks and frightened children. Property owners abandoned their investments. Private doctors refused house calls. Who stayed? Those who had no choice. Seamstresses, stevedores, laundresses, street vendors. People whose survival depended on remaining in that specific block. And while the rich debated theories in ventilated parlors, the poor dehydrated in unventilated rooms, surrounded by overflowing buckets. September progressed. The number of cases did not decrease. And then a doctor did something no one else dared. He ignored the experts. He ignored the manuals. He ignored the accepted theory. And he decided simply to count. Count addresses. Count water sources. Count patterns. He wasn't looking for miasmas. He was looking for connections. What John Snow discovered by mapping every case would change not only Broad Street, it would change medicine forever. John Snow was not the kind of doctor who frequented the dinners of London's medical elite. Trained without an aristocratic pedigree, he worked in working-class neighborhoods, attended births at dawn, treated injured workers. And he had a theory that isolated him professionally. Cholera did not come from the air, it came from the water, an idea considered radical, absurd even. After all, how could something invisible in crystal clear water be more dangerous than the putrid stench of the streets? The scientific community treated him with polite condescension. His articles were published but ignored, his lectures attended by skeptical audiences. When Broad Street collapsed, Snow saw not a tragedy. He saw an opportunity for a test. He started alone, leather notebook under his arm, a detailed map of the neighborhood, a sharpened pencil. He knocked door to door. He spoke with widows. He interviewed survivors. He always asked the same thing. Where did you drink water? From which pump? How often? He noted addresses, times, habits. Each confirmed case received a mark on the map, a vertical black bar. A life interrupted, transformed into statistical data. On the third day of the survey, the pattern emerged with disturbing clarity. The bars were concentrated, not randomly, not following the wind or the topography. They formed an almost perfect circle around a single point. The Broad Street pump. 70% of the victims lived less than 250 meters from that specific source. Families who used pumps on parallel streets, drastically lower sickness rates. The map did not lie. The geometry of the tragedy pointed to a precise origin, but the most revealing detail came from an unexpected place. The Lion Brewery, located just a few meters from the pump, employed 70 workers. Men who spent 12 hours a day on that block, exposed to the same contaminated air that supposedly caused the epidemic. How many fell ill? None. 0 cases. Snow investigated. He discovered that the brewery had its own well. And more, the workers received a daily ration of weak beer as part of their payment. They simply did not drink from the public pump. And they did not get sick. Snow had evidence. He had a geographical pattern. He had an involuntary comparative control. He had everything a modern epidemiologist would need to close a case. But it was 1854, and convincing the Soho Board of Guardians to challenge decades of scientific consensus would be harder than mapping the epidemic, because data confronts theories, but theories have powerful defenders. Snow took his map to the Soho Board of Guardians, businessmen, landlords, local authorities. He presented the data. He showed the geographical concentration. He explained the brewery. He asked for a simple action. Remove the handle of the Broad Street pump, make it unusable. The response was predictable. Polite smiles, glances of condescension. A marginalized doctor asking the city to close its most popular water source based on bars drawn on a map? Miasma theory had decades of consensus. Snow had a notebook. The board thanked him for his dedication and filed the report. But someone took Snow seriously. The Reverend Henry Whitehead, the local curate, knew every family on Broad Street. Initially skeptical of the water theory, he decided to investigate on his own, not to prove Snow right, to prove Snow wrong. He visited the same houses, he asked the same questions, and he discovered something Snow had missed, a child who had fallen ill days before the main outbreak. The mother had discarded wash water into the domestic drain. The drain was 3 meters from the well. Whitehead confronted the data. He reassessed his position, and he switched sides. September 7, 1854. Whitehead used his influence with the board, not for science, for moral persistence. The handle was removed, the pump rendered useless. The epidemic was already in decline. The population had fled or succumbed. Statistically, the removal of the handle did not save lives at that moment, but the act had an unforeseen consequence. It created a precedent. It planted institutional doubt in miasma theory, and it gave Snow something he never had: documented credibility. Science didn't win that day, but it began to win. John Snow passed away in 1858, 4 years after Broad Street. His theory of waterborne transmission was still contested. His maps filed away as a methodological curiosity. The medical consensus continued to favor miasmas. Decades passed. Pasteur discovered microorganisms. Koch isolated the cholera vibrio. And slowly, the scientific community revisited the archives of a stubborn doctor who mapped an epidemic when everyone looked at the sky while he looked at the ground. Today, basic sanitation systems save more lives than any medicine ever invented. Epidemiology is a fundamental science. Outbreak tracking follows protocols that Snow invented alone, with pencil and paper. It all started on a block in Soho, with a man who chose data over dogmas, with a map no one wanted to see. The Broad Street pump still exists, rebuilt as a historical monument. Tourists take photos. Some drink from the functional replica installed at the original location. Few know they are standing over an invisible cemetery, that every stone of that sidewalk witnessed the collapse, that 616 stories ended there because science was wrong and one man was right, but he didn't have the power to be heard. I'm Tom, and I want to know from you. If we were in 1854 and an unknown doctor asked you to stop drinking the cleanest water in the city based on marks on a map, would you believe him? Comment below and subscribe to the channel because the next story is even darker.